Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda is best remembered as the three-time Formula One champ who burned horrifically in a crash at the Nürburgring in 1976. His above-human fighting spirit to come back from the life-threatening burns to become the champ again is possibly best shown in the terrific film Rush. Watch it, it's friggin' awesome. Lauda, however, is quite often forgotten for post-racing roles at Ferrari, Jaguar and Mercedes in later life. Born into a rich family, Niki Lauda gave up everything to become possibly the only good pay driver in history. A legend of the sport and a hell of a fighter at heart, but is he better than later teammate, the Professor Alain Prost? Let the go-off begin. Alain Prost. One of my first Formula One memories is of Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost taking each other off at Suzuka in 1989, while both men were supposed to be teammates at McLaren, and 1 year later when Prost had left my oh so beloved McLaren for the prancing horse. Prost was my favourite, but until his comeback after a year off in 93, Senna seemed to have his number. The aging Professor came back for the season of his life, beating teammate and future champion Damon Hill thoroughly, dominating both Senna and McLaren in the oh-so-powerful Williams FW15 before retiring as a 4-time champion. Being made to look even better the next season after he retired, and of course his replacement Ayrton Senna sadly died at Imola, and Damon Hill was whooped by Michael Schumacher in the title battle. The sometimes whiny Frenchman was one of the greatest ever, but a GOAT? Let us see. Championships. 3 championships for Niki Lauda, 1975, 77 and 84. Of course, not winning 76, the year of his accident, that one going to James Hunt in the McLaren. 3 championships best sum up the ability of the once pay driver, a bit better than Stroll and Latifi, eh? As he showed his stuff, winning titles at Ferrari, retiring, coming back to become the champ again in a McLaren. The man affectionately known as the Rat, some nickname for a man who literally survived hell on earth, gets a rating of 8 out of 10. The Professor won the championship 4 times, 1985, 1986, 1989 and 1993, but at one stage it seemed like Alain Prost, always going to be the bridesmaid and never the bride, coming close to winning the championship at Renault and finishing second to teammate Lauda at McLaren by half a point. Also finishing second to Senna at McLaren means that with some less Fernando Alonso-like luck, Prost could have also won 7 titles. Too bad, Frenchie. Still won 4 though, which is mighty impressive. 8 out of 10. Race wins. Niki Lauda wins 25 races from 174 entries, which translates to a win percentage of 14.4%. The man who started 3 successful airlines, Lauda Air, Niki and Lauda Motion, knew all about winning, and in nabbing 25 W's in a glittering career, Lauda scores a 7 out of 10. Prost has 51 wins or 25.2% of races entered, which means he held the record for most wins till Michael Schumacher, and then later on Vettel and Hamilton passed it. Still ranked 4th on the all-time list, and the greatest Frenchman since Napoleon himself gets Alain Prost a 9 out of 10. Podiums. And Niki Lauda finishes with 54 podiums, 31% or a third of races started, meaning he had the better chance of scoring a top 3 than fellow triple champ Nelson Piquet, who did it 29% of the time. Not too shabby for someone who retired twice and had death try and TKO him. 7 out of 10. The Professor finished in the top 3 106 times, or 52.5% of races started, in a time when champions like Piquet retired 44% of all races. Yes, Piquet had some nice lawn chairs next to the track. Prost scored a podium half of the races he entered. Rating 9.5 out of 10. Head-to-head versus teammates. As Lauda had numerous teammates per season, because rules were psycho back then, and you could have like 40 cars per team and nobody had any control over it, only those of note will count. So some will be missed, but you really wouldn't know it unless you really go and do your own research. First up, Carlos Pache. Pache scored a few points for March and shaded the Austrian, who was a pay driver back then. Henley Pescarolo was also in a March, and they all sucked, and he pretty much drew against Lauda. Also in a March, Mike Beutler. What a surname. The car also sucked, but he was shaded by Lauda in race finishing positions. Also in a March, Rolf Stommelen. The unknown German was more consistent than the soon-to-be well-known Austrian and got more out of the bad March. Well, goodness, win for old Rolfie. Also in a March, but outscoring all the other slow-as growing grass Marches, Ronnie Peterson whooped the March boys. Guess the pay drivers did not get the same quality cars as the company drivers. Proving himself in the poor March, he got the PRM drive, where he was joined by Clay Regazzoni. Regazzoni also later on was Lauda's teammate at Ferrari, which led to the whole crapbox scene. Watch Rush, it's a great movie. Clay was quick, but Nicky came into his own, getting the backing from the factory team. And despite Regazzoni beating Lauda in a bad Ferrari in 74, it was Niki Lauda who became the champion in 75 and came out tops overall. But before Ferrari, there was Jean-Pierre Beltoise in the BRM, and Beltoise came out tops. There sure were a lot of similar cars back then though. Wonder how they figured who got the new parts. At the Ferrari though, Regazzoni left, Carlos Reutemann replaced him. He was unfortunately also the guy trying to get Lauda's job after his fiery crash in 76. So Lauda wasn't a great fan of Reutemann and smashed him as a teammate, winning a second title at Ferrari in 1977. Lauda left Ferrari for Brabham and was joined by up-and-comer John Watson. He soundly beat Watson at Brabham, got him replaced by Nelson Piquet, and promptly retired. When he made his comeback at McLaren a few years later, it was once again John Watson who was his teammate. And he beat Lauda over 2 seasons in the McLaren. Plot twist. Before he retired though, it was Nelson Piquet at Brabham who managed to drive Lauda over the edge in less than a season together. Guess that gives Piquet the win for doing what not even a burning Ferrari could. After he came back, and at that time being beaten by John Watson, Alain Prost came in, replacing Watson, coming from Renault, and immediately Prost managed to get the best out of Lauda, finishing second in the World Championship behind Lauda. 0.5 points in it. Amazing. The Austrian had fought back hard against all the odds once more, but he should have retired. He stayed one more season, and his final season as defending champ was torrid. He made Damon Hill's 1996 performance look awesome, as Lauda only scored 14 points to Prost's 69 before calling it a day. Surprisingly, Lauda wasn't a very dominant teammate and can only legitimately score a rather disappointing 6 out of 10. Alain Prost was always seen as the ultimate professional, but how did he do against his teammates head to head? John Watson was up first at McLaren in 1980, then again in 1985, also at McLaren. And Prost just edged him in 1980 and beat him again in 85. 81, Prost joined a Renault, where he was teamed up with René Arnoux, and the French super team almost went all the way, just missing out on the championship mainly due to reliability issues. Prost bumps Arnoux by 77 points to 39 over 2 seasons. Arnoux left and was replaced by Eddie Cheever, and Eddie Cheever was whipped like some proper French mayonnaise by Monsieur Prost. Niki Lauda was waiting at McLaren as Prost bailed from Renault to return to the white and red team, and immediately Lauda pulled out a rabbit from the hat and beat Prost by that half a point to win the championship. The very next season though, Prost beat Lauda by 69 points to 14, forcing the Austrian into retirement before the end of the season. Gonna call it a win for Prost. It's one championship versus one ass whooping in a championship equals one victory for the Frenchie. Keke Rosberg came in, another former world champion, and he was clubbed 74 points to 22 as Alain Prost defended the title that he won from Niki Lauda. Out went Rosberg, in came Stefan Johansson, who was also a driver for Ferrari, so he did have some quality, but he was soundly beaten in every aspect by Alain Prost, Ayrton Senna. And so was born the ultimate Formula One rivalry. Over 2 seasons, these two won 25 out of 32 races, scored 30 out of 32 pole positions, and won both drivers' and constructors' championships. Incredible that it only lasted 2 seasons. Head-to-head it ended with Senna winning 14 to Prost 11, Senna getting 26 poles to Prost 4, 6 fastest laps for Senna, 12 for Prost, 18 podiums for Senna, 25 to Prost, each winning one driver's championship, and in total Prost outscoring Senna by 163 to 150. Of course, all of those points didn't count for the championship, as they had a stupid rule that only a number of your best results counted. Stupid rule. I'm calling this a draw, and if you don't agree with me, you, sir, should be on some medication. Prost couldn't stick around anymore. He'd had his fill with Senna and he left for Ferrari, taking of course the number 1 with him. Nigel Mansell was waiting. Prost demanded and got the number 1 driver status and dominated the sacred mustache. Next season, Jean Alesi replaced the Williams-bound Mansell, but of course Alesi could never replace that mustache. The Ferrari sucked. Prost pipped Alesi over the season, but the car was so bad that he decided to take a year off, coming back in '93 at the dominant Williams, in which Mansell had become the champion, replacing Mansell, which being joined by rookie Damon Hill. This was to be Prost's final year. He destroyed Hill and everyone else over the course of an amazing season and left the sport as the champion and the leading race winner in Formula One history. Rating 8.5 out of 10. Losses to Lauda and Senna, but redeems himself by beating them both later on. Consistency. Looking at wins per season, his first 3 seasons he was a pay driver, couldn't win jack, couldn't get the side of the bus with those cars. Then at Ferraris, things started picking up. 2 wins, 5, 3 wins, 2. Brabham, not that great, comes back at McLaren. Overall, relatively consistent when he had a good car. Points per season, see him peaking there, 75, 64 points, 76, 68, 77, 72. But then we see a very significant downturn. 84, he smashes it with his final championship, and such a disappointing last season. Podiums, was a consistent podium scorer. His best season being 10 podiums in 1977 and then 9 in his second last season. Retirements, 86 retirements for Niki Lauda, almost 50% of races entered. That means of course the cars weren't great at not braking back then. Blown turbos and smashed wishbones were a daily occurrence, and when Lauda finished, he seemed to score points. Great on character, but not that great on consistency. Seems like the rat was more great in segments than as a consistently great driver. Maybe motivation played a role. I assume of course your priorities change when you exit a burning ball of petrol. The rat gets a 6 out of 10. Wins per season. 2 seasons in his career he did not win a race. His very first season and his second to last season. Both times in an uncompetitive car. Points per season. Podiums, he was very consistent. Very consistent. Now you look at retirements. Now the cars weren't that great back then. 66 retirements. coming to 32.7% of races entered. Of course, if you look at his whole career, he had 128 points finishes, or 63.4% of races entered. But when his car didn't pack in, and Prost didn't make many mistakes, his biggest weakness was probably wet weather driving, he pretty much always finished in the points. Great work, Monsieur Prost. 10 out of 10 for consistency. Qualifying. Lauda achieved 24 poles. Stop it, man. What's wrong with you and those lame pole jokes? Get it right. At an average of 13.8% of races entered. Not to be scoffed at, but not exactly record-breaking stuff, eh? 7 out of 10 for qualifying. Ah, the Achilles heel. Not exactly Mr. Prost's forte. 33 poles, or 69% of races entered. Not bad, not legendary. 7 out of 10 for qualifying. So Andreas Nicolaus Lauda ends up scoring an underwhelming 41 out of 60. The records can't lie, but it seems they can try. Bring me the professor. That brings us to a total of, drumroll, 52 out of 60. So let's head to the verdict, because the jury is out and the professor beats the rat in the race for goatness. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bump that sub button, ring the bell, and join us again soon on History for new original content. God bless.